So here's a word for you. Sexualization. Whew, it's a mouthful. Sexualization. Now, when I say that word, I'm going to say it one more time. Sexualization. What's the first thing that pops up for you? The first feeling or thought or perhaps even image? Sexualization. What does it mean? Hey, Ken Donaldson here, back again for another episode of Sex, Addiction, and the Missing Piece. And today, guess what we're going to talk about? You got it. Sexualization, which is a mouthful. And I have one particular piece of research that's a giant piece of research that I want to share some of it with you. But let me give you a little backstory as to where I'm coming from with this and where I'm hoping to go with this, okay? So part of the purpose of this podcast and part of the purpose of the work I do as a psychotherapist, as a clinical sexologist, and as an addictionologist is to try to help people synthesize all three parts: their psychology, their emotions, and their sexuality, and their relationships. Four parts, actually. And what I've discovered is that this malady, if you will, that we're referring to as sexual addiction has a lot of different reactions to it. And those of you that have listened to previous episodes, I've gone over some of that. We have a lot of conflict about the different names that we're calling it and how we're classifying it. And there's a lot of people and organizations that aren't even endorsing it as being a real thing. I'm not going to get into that controversy today about whether it exists or not. We're just going to go with sexual addiction as a term. And what I want to focus on today is, where did this come from? How did it come to be? First of all, I will say that when I was in graduate school, I took a class in, I believe it was 1990. It was human sexuality and marriage therapy. I believe that was the name of it. And we were assigned a term paper, which means the professor called it a research paper, but it wasn't really a true research paper. But we were to take the entire semester and focus on this one subject area. Could be pretty much whatever we wanted. It just so happened that I had a client. I just opened my brand new practice part-time. Just so happened I had a client who showed up who referred to himself as a sex addict. Now, at that point, I had a lot of experience in the world of addiction. I had become a certified addiction professional in the state of Florida, but I was not that familiar with sexual addiction. In fact, I'd never heard of it before. So I took the opportunity that this class presented and decided to dedicate my term paper, my research paper, to sexual addiction. And what I discovered was that there was one person that really had given himself and his entire body of work to the world of sexual addiction. And that person is Dr. Patrick Carnes. I read 4 of his books and used them a lot in the research as I was writing it up as references. He was one of the few available references that were out there back in 1990, I think it was 90 or 91. And so I'm using him currently, and we will actually have some upcoming episodes of Sex, Addiction, and the Missing Piece that will focus on some of Patrick Carnes' work. However, today I want to focus on this thing that I'm referring to as sexualization. And just so you know, this piece of paper that I keep waving here in front of me is entitled Media and Sexualization, State of Empirical Research, 1995 to 2015. So this is an overview of research that took place over these 20 years. This was published in 2016 in the Journal of Sex Research. So this was an overview looking at a variety. I believe there was a total of almost 200 pieces of research that went into this one particular paper to try to come up with a synopsis about media and sexualization. And I wanted to share a few pieces with you because I think this also has something to do with where did sexual addiction come from. Patrick Carnes was really the person who put it on the map for us as far as the clinical world. He's the first person that wrote about it and published it and continued to do so, even though I'm sure he got plenty of backlash and plenty of weird looks because back in the 80s, I believe his first book came out. It was either 81 or 83, Out of the Shadows. Most people that term sexual addiction, they didn't even know what that meant. A lot of people today still don't know what that means, which is part of the reason why I'm here, to educate people and help people understand these dynamics a little bit better. I wanted to share a few pieces from this research because this is really fascinating. It looks at media and the changes that media has gone through. When I say media, all forms of media. So it's printed media, billboards, television, radio, internet, all of them, any way, shape, or form of media. So, and it's very comprehensive in its overview. So let me start with this piece here. And I'm just going to read a few things to you and then comment. And then hopefully you all will send me some more questions. Somebody asked about this, actually. That's why I'm going down this avenue. Listen to this. Sexual objectification occurs whenever people's bodies, body parts, or sexual functions are separated from their identity, reduced to the status of mere instruments, or regarded as if they were capable of representing them. In other words, when objectified, individuals are treated as bodies, and in particular, as bodies that exist for the use and pleasure of others. There's your definition of sexual objectification. That doesn't sound so great, does it? Hang on, there's more. Okay. Sexualization is not the same as sex or sexuality. It is a form of sexism. It is a narrow frame of women's worth and value in which they are seen only as sexual body parts for others' sexual pleasure. There is no mutuality in sexualization. One person is quote unquote using the other for his or her gratification without regard to the other's needs, interests, or desires. Got all that? Let's continue on. Now we're going to get into some actual numbers based on the research. The sexualization of women is predominant in the world of advertising, with evidence that sexually objectifying portrayals of women appear in 22% of TV commercials featuring women. So 22% of all the television commercials that have women in them, they've identified as their sexualization, which means they're objectifying. They're trying to use the women as sexual objects, selling mechanisms, in other words, using the body. Analysis indicate that 51.8% of magazine ads feature women as sexual objects, and these are most common in men's magazines, it's about 76%, and women's magazines, which is about 56%. Here's an interesting part. Although video games do not feature high numbers of women, when women do appear, they are highly likely to have a sexually objectifying appearance. Of these women, 42.3% were physically objectified compared to 5.8% of the men, and 49% were portrayed as quote unquote busty or super busty. And I don't think that that requires an explanation. I think you know what that means. All right, continuing on, let me fast forward here. Some of the findings. First, findings indicate that exposure to sexually objectifying images of women is linked with young men's feeling more discomfort with their own bodies, as indicated by the higher levels of self-objectification and self-surveillance and lower body esteem. That's interesting. So younger men who are exposed to more of this sexualization of females end up having worse body image for themselves. That backfired. You made them feel worse, advertising people. Here's more. One piece of research demonstrated that young men who exhibited higher levels of hostile sexism more readily associated sexualized women with being the objects, not the agents of action, as compared to non-sexualized women. Listen to this part. Overall, it appears that viewing sexually objectified images of women does not activate the cognitive processes typically involved when thinking about humans, and instead activates cognitive processes typically reserved for objects. I got one comment to say about that. That sucks. That is not the way it was designed to be, but it is the way it is. And the people who are in the world of advertising, and for that matter, all of media, they are more psychologically savvy than some psychologists I know. And what I mean by that is that they understand how to get into our brains, how to activate us, how to hook us, how to manipulate us to get interested in something, to go somewhere, to do something, to buy something, to invest in something. And they're using it, one way they're doing it is that they're using women. They're using sexualization, $50 million word. Here's another piece. Findings also indicate that those exposed to sexualized images of women or to objectifying media content attribute more blame and responsibility to rape victims and offer them less empathy. How's that? That's a slap in the face for our culture. These effects have been shown to extend to child victims of bullying and to actual behavior defined in specific ways. In this one particular study, they defined gender harassment as choosing to select and send sexist or sexual jokes to a female chat partner. Across 2 studies, men primed with objectifying TV content engaged in more gender harassment than men without this exposure. Repeatedly, in the virtual world, those who regularly used a more sexualized avatar reported more experiences with sexual harassment, name calling, and obscene comments than those using less sexualized avatars. And we're just talking about an avatar, a little avatar, a symbol of who you are. Another piece of research demonstrated that young men's exposure to pornography, now we're leaping into the world of pornography, but this is all part of media. But online internet pornography is mainstream now. It's not, the day of Playboy magazine out behind the garage or penthouse, if you were really racy, those are long gone. They've been gone for a long time. So when we talk about the media, internet media, pornography is mainstream. In fact, some of the porn sites are some of the leading sites in terms of the number of visits they get, the number of clicks they get, and the amount of time that's spent there. Well, we're going to spend a whole episode or more on talking about pornography and the challenge we're having with it. But I want you to hear this. Young men's exposure to pornography, men's magazines, and reality TV each predicted greater objectification of women, which in turn predicted greater acceptance of violence against women. So this is not something that is just an addiction thing, okay? This is something that goes way beyond addiction. This goes into the world of abuse, bullying, violence, those red lines, those places that are way not okay. And I'm not suggesting that we eliminate our First Amendment rights by any means. We all have the freedom to express ourselves. And that's wonderful. That's part of I wake up every day and I'm so grateful for that. However, we are responsible for that. We are responsible for engaging in, investing in, spending time with these things that may be harmful to ourselves, but worse yet, our children, the kids. The kids are the ones, the young people are the ones who are going to be more influenced, more affected. So think about it a little bit. Think about this sexualization. It's been a gradual change, little by little by little. If you turn up the temperature 1/10 of a degree at a time, you hardly notice a difference until you notice the sweat beads rolling off your forehead and you go, hey, how did it get so warm here? Well, you've been sitting here and we just turned it up 1/10 of a degree every day, little bit, little bit, little bit. You didn't notice the 1/10 of the degree, but you noticed when you started sweating. We may not notice when the level of sexualization goes up, but we certainly notice the end results when domestic violence is increased, when sexual addiction is on the rise, when people are out of control with their pornography usage. So the end results speak for themselves. The ball comes back in our court. Each of us as an individual, we have a responsibility to say something, to do something. Yes, we have the freedom of speech, which means that we can exercise our voices to change things. So once again, I invite you to comment, ask questions, offer feedback, make suggestions for future episodes. This is Ken Donaldson again, sex, addiction, and the missing piece. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again real soon. Take care.